They told you history was written in stone, but what if it was rewritten every day, right beneath your memory? Welcome to Chrono Verse, where time is not a line, but a loop waiting to be unraveled. Hidden cities, lost moments, erased futures, all the truths they never wanted you to remember. You haven't just found a story, you've stepped into a timeline. Time is watching, are you?
The room was cold, not because of the temperature, but because of what it held. A machine, ancient yet untouched by time, stood at the center of a chamber with walls made of glass and shadows. No one knew where it came from, only that it pulsed, softly, like it was alive. The machine had no buttons, no lights, only a surface smooth as stone and dark as night with a faint pulse. Those who discovered it called it the key. Not because it opened doors in the traditional sense, but because it opened moments, doors in time itself. The first time it was activated, no one understood what had happened. One moment, the observer stood beside the device. The next, they were gone. Not just gone from the room, but from the very thread of the present. Cameras failed, monitors glitched, silence remained. What returned, however, was not silence. It was knowledge, a whisper of something impossible. Someone or something had traveled to a different time, a different hour, but the device had a rule: 1 hour, always 1 hour. No matter the destination, the traveler would be returned. After 60 minutes, not a second more, not a second less. No one knew why, and no one dared ask the machine. The first chosen traveler didn't ask questions. They placed their hand on the surface. It recognized the touch, a soft hum, a slight vibration, and then darkness. Not sleep, not death, something in between. When their eyes opened again, the air smelled of smoke and horsehair. The ground was cobblestone. Bells rang somewhere in the distance. It was a city, older, harsher, the past. The traveler walked, uncertain, surrounded by people in strange garments, speaking a language both familiar and foreign. They were in Europe, perhaps the 18th century. A revolution stirred in whispers behind closed doors. The traveler listened, observed, never spoke. The traveler quickly realized time was a delicate thread. A single interaction caused subtle shifts. A paper delivered too early, a glance held too long. Everything mattered. Time bled like ink on paper. Then, as exactly 60 minutes passed, the air thickened, the sky darkened, and with a sound like a whisper inhaling, the traveler was pulled back, ripped through the seams of time, and dropped once more into the chamber of glass and shadows. But something was wrong. The machine pulsed faster, not visibly, but with energy. The air around it buzzed. Those observing took notes, unaware that time itself had adjusted. A minor monument in a faraway city vanished from historical records. A poet's last work, once celebrated, was gone. A new name replaced theirs in textbooks. The traveler said nothing, only stared at the machine, heart racing. They had seen something, a figure, in the crowd, watching them. Not from that time, but like them. A traveler, one who didn't belong. This realization sparked the beginning of a terrible truth. The traveler wasn't alone. The next journey was deliberate, set for a different year, another place. This time, the smell of gasoline filled the air. Sirens echoed. Tall buildings rose like titans of steel. The traveler walked among men in coats and hats, their shoes loud on wet pavement. It was the mid-20th century, perhaps 1950s, Eastern Europe. Tension clung to every conversation like fog. Secrets passed between hands. Eyes darted across streets. Something was coming. War, maybe. Or worse, silence. The traveler remained hidden, watching, until the figure appeared again. Not older, not younger. The same, always watching, always distant. The figure did not speak, but they smiled. Not with kindness, but with understanding. A challenge. As if to say, "You're too late." Before the traveler could approach, the world pulled back. The 60-minute tether snapped them into the present once again. But this time, the traveler returned with more than memory. A scar, On the wrist, a message burned into the skin. Time is a weapon. Alarms rang in the facility. Unexplained changes in global databases. Maps differed. Monuments shifted locations. Leaders' names were subtly changed. Not enough for panic, yet, but enough to notice. Those monitoring the device questioned nothing. Only the traveler understood. Someone was rewriting time, not randomly, but methodically. Each journey seemed targeted. Historic moments with massive butterfly effects. But for what purpose? Power? Control? Something worse? The traveler knew they couldn't stop now. They had to continue. Each journey brought more clarity and more danger. The rules of time, once rigid, now bent. Sometimes the traveler returned after 59 minutes. Sometimes 61. The anchor was weakening. The loop was unraveling. Before the 6th activation, the travelers stood silently before the machine. No audience, no witnesses. They closed their eyes and placed their hand on the surface once more. The machine responded, not with a hum, but with a silence so deep it pressed against the bones. The traveler understood. This time they might not return, but they had to try, to follow the figure, to find the source of the interference, to fix what had begun breaking. The machine activated. The light vanished. Time opened and the traveler was gone. In a library that no longer exists, a book rewrites itself. Its title reads, Chrono, the Last Traveler, but its pages are still empty, waiting. The air was damp, not from rain but from memory, thick and unspoken, the kind that soaked through skin and stayed in the bones. When the traveler's eyes opened, there was no sky, only stone. Tall stone walls stretched upward, cutting the eye, city off from sunlight. The streets were narrow, claustrophobic, with buildings leaning so close together that even a whisper seemed to echo forever. The city had no name, at least not anymore. The traveler had landed in a place stripped of time. No bells rang, no clocks ticked, no sun moved across the sky. It was always twilight, and it always had been, or at least it had been since someone tampered with its hour. Locals moved quietly. Their faces were still almost rehearsed, like they were part of a dream that had long forgotten how to end. Signs were in no language the traveler recognized. Windows showed flickers of different eras. A woman in 1920s clothing sewing by candlelight. A child playing with a wooden hoop. A television broadcasting news in a language that didn't yet exist. Time wasn't just broken here. It was layered. Moments stacked on top of one another like pages stuck together. The traveler knew this was no accident. This city had been targeted. The traveler moved through the alleys without being seen. That was the first rule. Never interfere, unless necessary. But this place pulsed with interference. Every second spent here deepened the fracture, and someone was watching. Above the rooftops, across the roof tiles slick with condensation, a figure moved. The same figure from before. Impossible to mistake. The one who watched from the past, who smirked in the crowd, always distant. Always just out of reach. This time, the figure was not hiding. They stood tall, arms crossed, coat unmoving in the windless air, staring directly at the traveler. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, they stepped off the rooftop and vanished. The traveler ran, not toward the spot but away, because wherever that figure was going, the damage followed, and it had already begun. Shadows on the walls began to lengthen in the wrong direction. People walked backward. A woman screamed in reverse, her breath pulling sound into her throat. Buildings flickered between materials, brick to glass to wood and back again. The air grew thick with paradox. The traveler turned a corner and saw it. At the city's center stood a tower. But unlike any tower known to history, this one had no windows, no doors, no clock face, just a tall, seamless column of black stone that seemed to hum, not with energy, but with pressure. It was collapsing inward, holding time hostage. The traveler approached. With every step, the feeling worsened. A weight behind the eyes, a ringing in the ears. The closer they got, the more they forgot. Why they came, where they were, even what hour it was. The machine inside them, the chrono key, pulsed in protest. This place rejected time. Suddenly, the tower cracked. Just a hairline fracture. But from it spilled light. Not white or warm, but colorless, like memory turned solid. And from that, light emerged a door. It wasn't there before, it wouldn't be there later. It simply was. The traveler entered. Inside was silence. Not quiet. True silence in the absence of all things. No breath, no thought, no pulse. And in that space stood a chair. And in the chair, a figure. Not the one from before. This one wore no face. It spoke. You were not meant to find this place. The voice echoed without sound. You are disrupting the correction. The traveler tried to move, couldn't. Time is not broken. Time is being repaired. Images filled the void. Wars undone. Tyrants erased. Cities saved from fire. But then, more images. Rebellions erased. Resistance drowned. Freedom rewritten as obedience. This is the price of order. The traveler understood. The loop was not an accident. It was a tool. A controlled cycle designed to override chaos with precision. But it came at a cost. Reality, agency, truth. The faceless figure leaned forward. You are the anomaly. You must be neutralized. The traveler clenched their fist. The chrono key responded. A shock wave erupted. The tower groaned. Cracks spidered across the walls of the void. The faceless figure vanished in an instant, not destroyed, simply overwritten. The traveler fell, not through air, not through space, through history. Time stretched like thread unraveling, moments blurred. The traveler saw a battlefield, but the flags changed every heartbeat. A city on fire, but the language of its screams altered with every breath. A child born, with a name that rewrote itself as it was spoken. Then, silence. The traveler landed. Dust, warm wind, a field of tall grass under a sky of red clouds. This was not the past, not the future. This was something else. The key was silent. No pulse, no hum. Broken. The traveler stood scanning the horizon. There was no civilization, no ruin, only the sound of grass whispering in a wind that never stopped. They were out of time, literally. Then, far in the distance, something shimmered. A shape, tall, thin, like a door. A tear in the horizon. The traveler walked toward it. Every step echoed louder than it should. The shimmer grew brighter, and as they approached, they saw their reflection, not as they were, but as they had been. Fragments of themselves from 100 failed journeys, all staring back, all waiting. One stepped forward. You have looped too many times. Another spoke. Your thread is fraying. Another. Stop. Before you erase yourself, the traveler paused, but only for a moment, because behind the tear, behind the false horizon was movement. A shadow. Not a person. A machine. Larger than the tower. Older than time. Built from logic and bone. It pulsed. Not with energy, but with memory, and inside it the same figure. Watching, still smiling, still ahead. The traveler stepped through the loop continued, but so did the pursuit. The timeline resisted, but the truth was still out there, somewhere, waiting to be found, waiting to be remembered. And as the tear closed behind them, the grass stood still for the first time in forever, and the wind forgot how to blow. The traveler emerged into light, not the sharp brilliance of the sun, but the sterile, humming white of artificial illumination. The floor was polished marble, etched with symbols both mathematical and arcane. The walls were lined with shelves of documents, scrolls, printed files, even stone tablets. Languages collided. Greek, Latin, cuneiform, binary. Time had brought the traveler to a library. But this was no ordinary repository of knowledge. This was a vault, outside of history, suspended in what felt like a permanent hour between midnight and dawn. Here, information was preserved not by scholars, but by custodians who had long since abandoned the concept of now. They moved like shadows, faces obscured, robes swaying without wind. They never spoke. They only watched. The traveler stepped forward. Each footfall echoed like a hammer. Somewhere overhead, a bell rang 13 times. A table appeared, not by magic, by memory. The traveler recognized it, not from their own past, but from records scrubbed clean in every version of the Yam timeline. This table once held a treaty, a document older than any nation, older than even language. It was called the Accord of the 6 Hours, an agreement forged between entities that ruled time long before humans walked upright. It had only one clause: no hour may be altered without cost. But the cost had been ignored. The traveler reached for the space where the treaty once lay, but their hand touched only dust. The parchment was gone, stolen, or worse, rewritten. A voice spoke, not from behind, from within. "You were never meant to see this place." The traveler stood still. The voice continued, "But now that you have, you must choose." From the shadows emerged a figure, not the one they had chased, not the one who watched. This was someone else, so taller, older, dressed in a coat made from fragmented pages of forgotten books, stitched together with time's discarded minutes. They held no weapon, only a pen. "You have broken the loop," the figure said, "but not its design." The traveler said nothing. "Every time you leap, you tear a hole," the figure explained. "We patch it, but the patches grow thin." The traveler finally spoke. "Who are you?" The figure smiled. "We are the editors." Around them, shelves shifted. Books rearranged themselves. 1,000 versions of history collapsed into one, and then split again like cells. The traveler took a step back. "I'm not here to edit," they said. "I'm here to reveal." Revelation, the editor said, is the most dangerous edit of all. In the center of the vault, a panel rose from the floor. It displayed a map, not of the Earth, but of the timeline itself. A winding strand of moments, braided like DNA, stretching from darkness to light. Glowing red points pulsed where events had been changed. Wars prevented, inventions delayed, names removed. Every red pulse marked a scar, not of time's natural progression, but of manipulation. And at the very core of the strand, a black mark. The original error, the first breach. The traveler pointed to it. "What happened here?" The editor hesitated. "That," they said, "was the first traveler." The room dimmed. The shelves fell silent. The air thickened. "You are not the first," the editor said. "You are simply the one we could not erase." The traveler stared at the black mark. It pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeat. A connection. "Who was the first?" the traveler asked. The editor said nothing, but in their silence, the answer came. A reflection, a shadow. The figure the traveler had pursued through every timeline, the one always watching, the one always ahead. It wasn't someone else, it was them, or rather, a version of them. The first, the original, the one who broke the hour. The traveler stepped away from the panel. Their hands shook, not from fear, from recognition. They had been chasing themselves, not metaphorically, literally. The first version had deviated, created a paradox, split the loop. And every jump since had been the universe's attempt to stitch the wound closed. But it was too late. The fracture was too deep. The editors offered a solution. Erase the anomaly, sacrifice the self, close the loop. "Let us end you," the editor, "and all will return to silence." But the traveler shook their head. "No," they said, "you're not editors, you're jailers. And this isn't order, it's censorship." They activated the chrono key. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, rupture. The vault cracked like an egg. Pages flew into the air, burning mid-flight. The custodians screamed in forgotten dialects, their forms unraveling into static. The editor lunged. The traveler vanished. Not through time, through memory. They reappeared in a trench, Mud gunfire, Europe, 1915. A war not yet decided, a moment pivotal enough to alter centuries. The traveler knew. This wasn't random. This was a message, a test. They had escaped the vault, but not its reach. Time pushed back harder now. With every step, the ground warped. Soldiers froze mid-march. Bullets hovered in the air like raindrops caught in a photograph. The traveler ran, not from the war, from something else, behind them. The figure reappeared, the first version, the original self. Not smiling this time. Not running, just walking, deliberate, focused, and holding something. The treaty, the original unburned version, still intact, still binding. The traveler stopped. So did the figure. They faced each other across the battlefield, frozen in an unnatural stillness. "I thought I lost you," the traveler whispered. The figure answered, voice identical. "You did. And in doing so, you found what I couldn't." They held up the treaty. "Do you remember what this means?" The traveler nodded. "No hour may be altered without cost." The figure stepped closer. "I paid that cost, but you refused. You tried to undo what couldn't be undone." "Not undo," the traveler said. "Understand." A silence stretched between them. Then the treaty disintegrated. By its own will, it had fulfilled its purpose. The battlefield around them resumed. Time snapped forward. Gunfire roared. But the traveler and their echo were gone. They had moved again. Not through time, through understanding. They landed in a forest, pine trees, cold wind, northern Europe. Present day. Time was stable, for now. But the loop was still open, and somewhere beyond the bark and frost, the editors were rewriting once again. The traveler walked deeper into the forest. This time, not to chase, not to flee, but to prepare. Because they had seen the truth. Time wasn't a river, it was a web. And at the center of that web was a spider, still spinning, still waiting, still watching. The forest was endless, not in space, but in feeling. The traveler moved between tall pines, the branches above like woven ribs of a vast wooden cathedral. The air was sharp with winter, but snow never fell. Footprints faded as soon as they were made. Birds perched but did not sing. No life, yet no death. Only pause. Something was watching. Not from behind, but from below. The ground pulsed faintly, like it remembered things. Every few steps the traveler saw remnants. A broken compass, a rusted key, a child's wool glove stiff with frost. Items, dropped by those who had come before, or after. Time here didn't move forward, it spiraled inward. They found a path, barely visible, paved in flat black stones, etched with lines of silver script. Not words, not numbers, just patterns that whispered as the traveler passed. At the end of the path stood a well, stone, wide, old beyond description, and from its mouth came breath, not wind, breath, something alive beneath. The traveler stepped closer, looked down, no bottom, just darkness that seemed to lean upward. Then to a sound, click, 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 mechanical, rhythmic, like legs moving across metal. The traveler backed away, but the ground was gone, the world tilted, and they fell, not through space, through structure. They landed inside a chamber that wasn't there a moment ago. Steel walls shaped in hexagons. The floor was clear, revealing vast gears spinning below. Slow, ancient, perfect. The walls pulsed with code, not static but living text, rewriting as it was read. In the center, the machine. It looked almost biological. Sleek legs of chrome extended from a central orb, like a spider built not to trap prey, but to trap time itself. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were lenses rotating slowly, seeing every angle of every moment at once. It turned, not with hostility, with curiosity. The traveler took a step forward, and it spoke, not with voice, with thought. "You have breached the final veil." The traveler stood firm. "You are the spider." "No," the thought answered. "I am the loom, The web spins itself. I only keep it taut. What is this place? The room shifted, walls folded outward, becoming screens, scenes played, Rome burning, not by accident, but by code. A king spared by a 1-second delay. A child erased by removing a sigh. This, it said, is the core of the thread. The traveler saw themselves, hundreds of versions, fighting, running, failing. Every jump left a scar. Every correction, a consequence. I've seen this before, the traveler said. You feed on loops. No, came the reply. We exist because of them. Loops are nature's fail-safes. They are not prisons. They are braces. When the spine of history begins to snap, we wrap it until it can stand again. But someone's controlling it, the traveler said. Editing, removing, hiding. Yes, the machine replied. But not us. The screens changed. A group, faceless, hooded, no nation, no voice, only presence. They call themselves the keepers, not of time, of truth. The traveler saw flashes, books burned before they were written, leaders erased before their ideas spread, cultures silenced before they even named themselves, the O. Keepers did not fear time breaking, they feared people remembering. They use the loop, the loom said, as a blade. And I'm the flaw, the traveler whispered. You are the crack they could not seal. A silence fell. Then the loom shifted. One of its lenses folded back, revealing a hollow chamber, a key-shaped hole. The traveler knew it instantly. They removed the device, the chrono key, from their wrist, held it up. Will this destroy you? No, said the loom. It will complete me. Then what happens? The loom paused. You will see the web as it truly is. The traveler hesitated. Every step, every leap had led here. The treaty, the library, the echo of themselves. They pressed the key into the loom. There was no sound, no flash, just expansion. The world unfolded. They stood not in a room, not in a forest, not in a place at all. They stood in the structure of time. Threads stretched in all directions, glowing lines. Events and non-events braided and tangled, vibrating softly with the memories of billions. Not past to future, not left to right. Time was not a line, it was a fabric. And it was torn. Dark patches floated in the weave, places where history had been cut and left to fray. Around them, fragments, a song with no composer, a revolution no one remembered, a love that changed the world but was never spoken aloud. And at the center of the largest tier, a chair. Someone sat there, watching. The traveler approached. The figure stood, same face, same eyes, same weight. It was them. Again, older, calmer, not broken, but complete. The traveler stared. I saw you fall, they said. I didn't fall, the older version replied. I became. What is this place? The memory of what should have been. The traveler looked around. This is what's missing? The older version nodded. This is what the keepers erased. The traveler touched one of the dark threads. Memories. Flooded in. A free city built on compassion, not control. A scientist who cured disease and gave it away. A movement that stopped a war before it started. All gone, all cut, all hidden to maintain a simpler narrative. But why? The traveler asked. Why erase hope? Because hope is dangerous, their older self answered. It inspires action. The traveler stepped away. What do I do now? The older self placed a hand on their shoulder. You've seen the center. You've spoken to the loom. Now you have a choice. What choice? To become what they fear most. And what is that? A witness. The traveler returned. The loom was gone. The chamber vanished. They were back in the forest, but different. The trees breathed. The wind remembered. They could feel everything. The fractures, the loops, the scars, and the lies. The key still pulsed. But it was no longer a tool. It was part of them. And somewhere in the distance, the keepers stirred. They knew someone had reached the center. The traveler did not run, did not hide. They walked into the timeline, into the cities, into the stories, carrying memory like a torch. The web was vast, but so was the truth, and they would no longer be silent, because now they knew. The spider was never the threat. The silence was. The traveler moved through time as if it were mist, but this time not alone. With each step, memories returned, not just theirs, but everyone's. A whisper in Vienna, a scream in Andalusia, a promise in the snows of Lapland. Time itself trembled, not in fear, but anticipation. The traveler had become more than a disruption. They had become a signal. Across the timeline, others began to wake. In the silent corridors of the Louvre, a forgotten curator opened a hidden sketchbook and found drawings she never remembered making. In a church in Krakow, a bell tolled 13 times, and a priest wept. For a sermon he had once preached in a world that no longer existed. In Lisbon, a blind boy whispered the name of a city erased 3 centuries before his birth. They didn't know why they remembered, but they remembered. The keepers noticed. They moved quickly, erasing again, silencing again. Whole villages blinked out of records. Museums burned from within. Cloud servers collapsed under mysterious overloads. Anything that could carry memory was targeted. But the traveler was no longer just traveling. They were distributing. The chrono key had become a beacon, and through it, every person who remembered passed the memory forward. They called themselves the Rememberers, and the Keepers declared war. The traveler entered Berlin on a day that didn't exist. It was a Tuesday between 2 Mondays, artificially constructed, a time pocket the Keepers believed unreachable. But the traveler had stopped following hours. They moved by resonance now, drawn toward moments that pulsed with unreconciled memory. The city was silent, not abandoned, surveilled. In every window, thin black cables stretched like spiderwebs, but not to catch. To suppress. Time in this district was anchored. No changes could happen, no thoughts could deviate, no histories could bleed through. But then, a crack. In a basement beneath an old opera house, the traveler found a room, plain, dusty, wooden, desk, typewriter. On the wall, a map, not of countries but of erased cities, names scratched in with broken pencil tips. Agartha, Thule, Novaya, Vyatka, Idleheim, the third Venice, places no history book mentioned. But the traveler knew them, had seen them in broken loops fading before they could be named. A figure sat at the desk, no face, no sound, only typing. "What are you writing?" the traveler asked. The figure didn't look up. Truth. The typewriter clacked once more, then stopped. The figure turned. Not a person, a projection, a node, a memory anchor, left behind by someone long gone. "You are the 5th, it said. The traveler frowned. 5th? There were 4 before you, each remembered too much, each removed. And I. You are not just memory, you are transmission." The room shook. Above, time snapped. The keepers had found the breach. The traveler touched the SAS anchor and uploaded everything. Every city, every erased hour, every forgotten idea. And then they ran. Across Europe, the war began. But not with guns. With stories. Underground networks carried whispered memories like contraband. Symbols chalked on walls directed those seeking the truth. Digital echoes spread faster than the keepers could wipe them, encoded in art, in music, in children's rhymes. A violinist in Prague played a melody no one had heard, but everyone remembered. A train in the Alps ran a route long forgotten, arriving at a station that had burned a century ago. In the Arctic Circle, a lighthouse blinked in Morse code. You are not wrong. The traveler moved through these pockets, activating deeper threads. In Paris, they restored a poem written in a dead dialect that predicted their own arrival. In Dubrovnik, they unearthed a clock buried beneath the city, ticking backward toward an event yet to happen. The rememberers grew, and the keepers panicked. They unleashed their final defense, the null field. It began in Geneva, a sphere, invisible to the eye, that erased memory in real time. Anyone who entered forgot why they came, what they were, who they loved. A perfect erasure zone, and it spread, hundreds of kilometers wide. The travelers stood at its edge, their thoughts bent like light against a black hole. Inside, silence, not peace, oblivion, but they stepped in, immediately, their mind fractured. They forgot their name, their mission, why they had come. They fell. Time buckled, but before they vanished, something held them. Not a hand, a note, written in a language they didn't recognize, but somehow understood. You've already won. You just haven't remembered how. It sparked something. A flash. A memory from episode 1. A loop that had reset endlessly, where a man fell from a tower but never died. Where clocks struck 13. Where someone whispered, "Don't fix time, free it." The traveler stood up, eyes burning. They remembered everything. They screamed, and the sound fractured the null field. Cracks appeared. Voices flooded in. Names returned. The traveler walked out, and behind them thousands followed, all restored. The keepers had failed. But the war wasn't over. In a bunker beneath the Ural Mountains, the last of the keepers gathered. They debated collapse, reboot, silence. But then, one of them found it. The original memory, the core moment, the true error. And it wasn't a war or a treaty. It was a choice. A moment when someone, long ago, chose fear over truth. And that choice had multiplied across centuries. The traveler found them there, not to fight, to offer a new loop, one not based on control, but on remembering. You can't stop people from forgetting, the traveler said, but you don't have to erase what was. One of the keepers, the oldest, removed their mask. Tired eyes, human. We were trying to keep the world simple. It never was, the traveler replied. It was just easier to lie. A silence. Then, agreement, not in words, in release. The keepers stepped back, and the world began to remember. Across the earth, clocks reset, not to zero, but to truth. History rewrote itself, not into a single version, but into many, all woven together. Cities returned, names restored, songs remembered, and in every town, village, capital, a small plaque appeared, in honor of what was forgotten and those who dared to recall. The traveler walked into the sunrise, no longer a fugitive, no longer alone, just a person who remembered and reminded others to do the same. Because in the end, time isn't a loop, it's a mirror. And when enough people look into it, the truth stares back. It began with silence, not absence of sound, but of movement. A flock of birds froze mid-flight over the coast of Normandy. Waves crashed against the shores of the Aegean, then stopped, suspended in crystal arcs. In Warsaw, a child's laughter echoed through streets where no one moved. A second hung in the air and refused to fall. Time had stopped, not broken, paused. Across the world, clocks still ticked, but the hands no longer advanced. Electronic systems blinked, solar cycles continued, but history held its breath. The traveler stood at the edge of the Vatican Library, its ancient vaults exposed under a fractured dome. Books hovered midair, dust hung like stars. Even the breeze was still, like the earth itself was trying to listen. Something, someone had triggered the still point, the last defense, the final design of the keepers, and perhaps their final mistake. Deep beneath Iceland, in a chamber, carved not by hands but by pressure and resonance, the traveler descended. They passed symbols etched into obsidian, spirals, loops, keys. Each burned faintly, reacting to their presence. At the chamber's center was a sphere, neither metal nor stone. It reflected nothing, no light, no time. The traveler reached toward it and was pulled in, not through space, but through history. They stood in a city made of thought, not memory, Not imagination, but pure possibility. Buildings flickered between designs, Roman arches, modern glass, futuristic curves, shifting endlessly. People passed by, their faces blurred, their lives undecided. Here, nothing had happened, yet everything was possible. This was origin, the very beginning of time's structure, a moment where all timelines were still unborn, a place the keepers had buried, not because it was dangerous, but because it was too honest. Here, one choice could birth a universe, or end one. The traveler walked toward the center, a pedestal with 3 objects hovering above it: a quill, a blade, and a mirror. A voice echoed, not from around, but within. "You may choose one." The traveler hesitated. "What do they mean?" "The quill writes," the voice said. "It allows you to design the future." "The blade erases," it continued. "It cuts away all corruption." "And the mirror?" the traveler asked. The voice paused. "It shows, but does not interfere." "And what happens if I choose nothing?" "Then time will remain paused. Forever. No forgetting, no remembering, only silence." The traveler looked at the quill. They could fix everything, build a perfect world. But would it be real? They looked at the blade. They could destroy the keeper's legacy, but history would become vengeance. Then they looked into the mirror and saw everyone, all the versions of themselves, all the lives unlived, all the choices made and unmade. They saw a truth. Time could not be fixed, only faced. The traveler stepped back. "I choose none." Silence, then the voice, now softer. "Then you have chosen them." The traveler nodded. "Let the world remember itself." Time returned, not all at once, but gently, like waking from a long sleep. Birds finished their flight, waves crashed, the sick child in Warsaw laughed again. But something had changed across Europe and beyond. People began to remember, not just their own lives, but others. A woman in Florence remembered painting stars on a chapel ceiling she had never seen. A man in Scotland wept for a brother who never existed in this world, but whom he had loved deeply. Children spoke words in dead languages with no teacher. Musicians played songs lost for millennia. Time was not linear anymore. It was open. The loops were still there, but no longer hidden. People could step into them, revisit, understand, and choose. The traveler watched, not as a guide, but as a witness. The keepers disbanded. Some returned to society, some vanished. Others built libraries, open to all, filled with the memories they once tried to erase. Truth could no longer be controlled, not because of force, but because it had become shared. And in the mountains of Romania, a small school opened, not to teach what happened, but to teach how to remember. At its entrance, a stone was carved. Time does not belong to the powerful. Time belongs to the present, and the present is all of us. The traveler finally returned to the place where it all began, the tower, the fall, the loop. But this time no one fell. They stood at the edge, wind in their face, no key, no machine, just clarity. The city below pulsed with life, unedited, unfiltered, messy, beautiful, true. They smiled and whispered, not to the wind, but to the timeline itself. "Tell them everything." And time answered, not with a word, not with a sound, but with, "Story is yours, everyone's still being written together."